I, Reuben and I connected, I don't know, a few months ago now. And as we were talking, I felt like what he knows is so important and it's something we haven't really dealt with yet. So I'm finishing up our, what I'm calling the revenue operating system. So that'll be in the new community platform, which, we're going to kind of get everybody an email and the link to join that. There'll be a big free component. So, it's be pretty easy to just sign up. It's not much of a decision then. And the revenue operating system includes a module on technology and systems. And I think, being a solo operator, it's really hard to get that stuff to work. And, Reuben's background is really on delivering services to enterprise for sales organizations. And I think mostly sales, right? And then doing that for himself didn't work. So it's kind of like, well, what I'm offering the market doesn't work for me, as a sort of a, small operator. And, what does then? And that's what he's been building is something that, pizza. That's new. So, nobody can keep talking when you show up now because they have to say pizza. That's it. Pattern interrupt. So I thought it was pretty cool. And I've seen this a lot. Like it seems like, at least for me, what I've noticed is we're moving into a world of micro solutions. So there's a solution for all the things you need to do, as opposed to a solution that is built for complex organizations like Salesforce or HubSpot that's going to make your life crazy. We've dumped all that stuff, and everything we're using is a micro solution that's designed specifically for what it's supposed to do. And it's made a big difference for me. So that's why I wanted Reuben to join. So why don't I turn it over to you? Do you want to do a presentation with slides? Do you want to talk and move quickly into a Q&A? What's your preference?
Well, I mean, I think I have infinite slides on this subject, but I think that's kind of boring. So I would rather just talk about some of the things that I think are really important and do Q&A and keep it interactive.
Okay, so what I'd like to do then is anybody who wants to kind of get in on this conversation with your own, there's a lot of people, a lot of expertise here. I mean, if Karen does stuff like this, George has built a technology company. There's a lot of people who know how to do these things too. So we could make it an active conversation. So put your name in the chat and
I had
start bringing people up. And please, everybody mute.
He's got a Porsche. He barely gets in.
Yeah, if everybody could mute. All right.
All right, George.
Okay, muted. I'm going to keep muting people if they don't. Okay. All right, Reuben, why don't you take over the meeting and I'll manage the chat as people raise your hand or, put yourself in the thread, and we'll just kind of bring everybody up in order.
Okay, sure. Well, first of all, Larry, thanks for having me. It's great to be with everyone this morning. I feel like I'm kind of amongst my people. And that was a big problem for me that you alluded to earlier. I was working for these Fortune 500 companies, ironically enough, doing sales and marketing consulting. And if I may say so, we were doing a good job. We got repeat business, we got referrals, we were doing something right. But when it came to doing my own sales and marketing, I was terrible and miserable at the same time. And those things were very related. And it took me a long time to realize that just because I was trying to help a Fortune 500 company improve sales and marketing and optimize Salesforce and this and that and the other thing, doesn't mean that those same techniques would be good for me. And I used Salesforce, I went to Dreamforce, I tried to do all the stuff. I tried to pretend like I was a salesperson, but I wasn't. And eventually I realized that's actually totally fine. And I am not only making myself miserable, I'm being really ineffective by pretending to be a salesperson. But if I forgot that I was in a quote unquote sales meeting and I was just discussing the problem with somebody, then everything would go great. It was like going to see the doctor gets it and you have a good conversation, you feel good, you want to go ahead with a procedure, the client wants to go ahead with a project. But as soon as like, oh my gosh, I'm in a sales meeting, I would kind of get all awkward and things would go sideways and go south. And so I'd love to say that this happened, the light bulb went off and I could just fix it and change, but it really took years of sort of deprogramming some of the bad lessons I was learning from sitting in these sales meetings at these super successful companies, right? It's not that they were doing anything wrong. It's just that I'm not supposed to be flying a space shuttle, right? I'm supposed to be on a bicycle. And if you put me on a bicycle, I'm fine. I don't need a freaking space shuttle. I don't need a 747. I don't need a whole Air Force. I just need a bike. And so I had to sort of deprogram myself. And one of the things I did was realize, hey, these proposals, we have these great discussions, finally getting better at having the discussions, I'm not even trying to sell, I'm just going to help. Because I'm a service person, I can help people, right? It's like a doctor. You don't want the doctor who's really effective at closing you. You want the doctor you feel is going to treat you. Then I'd go off and write the proposal and would have this follow-up conversation where they would basically ask me to explain what the heck the proposal was, because I had taken examples of proposals I had found full of jargon and crap and all this stuff, basically a bunch of narcissistic nonsense. And I don't know if you guys have sent proposals out like that. I sent a lot of them. I've received a bunch of them. And it's like, this doesn't help at all. And so I was like, well, wait a second. We had this great conversation. What if I just recap the conversation, right? Isn't that what the proposal is supposed to be anyway, right? It's like, we kind of agreed on what the problem was and how we're going to solve it and how we're going to work together and about how much it should cost and when it's going to be done. What if I just laid that out in plain English the same way I would if I was dealing with a friend, instead of like, oh, now it's all corporate, so I have to use all this impenetrable jargon. And I was like, well, it can't suck any worse than it's already sucking, so let me give it a shot, right? And lo and behold, instead of people saying, gosh, I don't get it, can you explain this to me? They're like, yeah, okay, great. You get it. Oh, this is great. Yeah, let's do this. It was real easy. But then I had this problem that eventually I got savvy enough that, hey, I'm not going to commit to a proposal till we have a meeting scheduled to review it. But half the time that meeting would get rescheduled. These are busy Fortune 500 executives. They're all over the place, whatever. And then I would be stuck leaving those voicemails like, hey, just wondering if you had any questions about my proposal. And, do I call again? Gosh, I don't want to not follow up, but I don't want to be annoying. What do I do? And I thought, well, I'm a tech guy. I should be able to do it such that I know if they've read my proposal, right? I put it in the cloud. And for some reason, this seemed like a good idea to me at the time. So I hacked together a little system to share a proposal online. And I remember getting a little notification from my system, called the guy up. He's like, hey, I'm so glad you called. I was just reading your proposal. And as I mentioned earlier, I'd actually gotten good at writing proposals. He was like, this looks really good. I want to do this, but let's just clarify a couple things. And we discussed exactly what changes we wanted to make and what it should say. And he was like, well, when you get the chance, send me another version and we'll get this thing signed and get started. And I was like, well, if you go back and look at it, I've made those changes already. And he's like, oh, wow, that's pretty handy. Now, I wasn't even thinking of this as a sales tool at the time. It was just like, I just want to go do the work. The client wants to go do the work. Let's not spend a month going back and forth, wasting everyone's time and letting the project potentially go sideways. Let's just get to what we want to do. And so he clicked the accept button. There was no e-signature then. And I was like, this is kind of nice. And I was telling some people about it. Like, hey, this is such a better experience. And they're like, yeah, can I have that? So I was like, oh, I guess so. Let me figure out how to make that happen, right? Like, this wasn't supposed to be a thing. It's just a tool for me. Now I'll make it a platform for you guys. And then what people started telling me was, wow, the end of my sales cycle actually goes really smoothly now. This is great. Now my big problem is the front of my funnel. How do I get more leads in the front of my funnel? And I remember having one of those moments like, at the end of the movie where they show all the hints that you were supposed to pick up to see who done it along the way, but you might have missed the first time through. Because looking at their websites, I was like, oh, I see why you don't get any leads. Because it's just like the proposal problem we talked about earlier is all narcissistic and about how awesome you are, and it doesn't really grab somebody and help them solve their problem. And so was like, okay, well, let's make your website something that actually helps your ideal prospects solve their problem. And let me figure out what you should do for lead gen. And I went off to go do some research. And this is kind of what Larry was talking about earlier as well, right? There's so many tools out there, but it's not necessarily the right fit. Even something like a HubSpot, which is a great tool for this kind of thing. I kind of think of it as you got this Salesforce Space Shuttle, you got the HubSpot 747, but it's relying on a sales team to follow up and just pound the phones. And if you're a solo consultant, you're spending most of your time actually with clients, that's not a very useful option for you. And I was like, well, wait a second. We're not talking about a high volume of leads, but each one could be really valuable. I've already got this technology that lets me create content and share it and tell you when someone's reading it. What if we had a way to plug that into a website? So instead of just doing it for a proposal or a contract, we could also do it for lead magnets. And instead of just sending someone a PDF, we can do something that's more mobile friendly. We can do something that will tell you when they go back and read it again. So you have more chances to have that conversation and follow up. And then people said, okay, this is cool. I get my leads, I put them in my spreadsheet, or I put them in my Salesforce, and I do my CRM thing, and then I do the proposal piece, but I hate my spreadsheet, I hate my Salesforce, I hate my whatever's in the middle. Why the heck can't you just make it do the piece in the middle? And I was like, the world does not need another CRM. That would be dumb. Who am I to do that? And I was trying all these different CRMs. Like, there's gotta be, someone has solved this problem. And I couldn't find anything that would work for me. Most of them had like way too much stuff in some areas and not enough in others. And what I realized is most of these tools, right, they're sold to the VP of sales. And the bigger the sales organization the VP of sales has, the more money you can make, right? That's why Salesforce and HubSpot and all these other tools have gone up market. It's not a bad move for them. It's great for them. But it doesn't work when you're the VP of sales and you're the sales rep, and you do this in your quote unquote spare time because you're busy with customers, right? We want something that really maximizes something that really maximizes the limited amount of time you have, and you don't want to necessarily be doing quote unquote sales calls. So one thing I said to myself, like, I forced myself to do cold calls for a while. Like, that's what salespeople do, right? You would do cold calls. Hated it. And I didn't get anywhere with it. And I was like, wait a second, I have this list of people that I already know, most of whom I think actually like me, and I don't talk to them. Why am I making myself call strangers who don't want to hear from me when I'm not talking to the people that I already know, people who I've worked with in the past, people who are friends, people who are partners, people that may or may not become clients, but I could help out by making introductions to? Like, why am I putting so much energy into something that I completely hate and ignoring something that's actually kind of nice, catching up with people that I already know? And I needed like a really brain dead way to do this. And I was trying to make different CRMs do this for me, and I couldn't get it to do what I want. So I was like, okay, I guess I have to listen to my customers, heaven forbid, and build the middle part, the CRM, so you can actually stay in contact with people, track referrals, build relationships that are going to lead to business and going to lead, I think, to not just monetary value, but I would think of it as psychological and maybe even spiritual value, especially when you're by yourself. Even as an introvert like me, like, I'm pretty happy just writing code behind my computer, but I still need human connection as well. And I need not just a sales funnel and a pipeline, but I need to feel like I'm being helpful, like I'm introducing people to people who need to know each other and so on, right? That's just part of how humans work, even if we're on the introverted side. Now, when I started explaining this concept, a lot of people are like, yeah, great. People finally get it. I need some lead magnets. I need to do this stuff. And what I discovered was people wouldn't be able to effectively create lead magnets. They weren't able to effectively tell their story because they're kind of, and this sounds bad, but they don't know who the heck their ideal client is. And I've been there. I totally get it. It's always embarrassing, especially when you're like a business expert or sales expert or, you know, sales accelerator coach, something like that. You're like, gosh, I'm not exactly sure who my ideal target is. But the only way to find out is to go have the conversations and do the work internally as well. And so that's where there's actually a little positioning wizard built into the CRM, because for the big sales team at the Fortune 500 company, that's already been decided for you. And you're there to go execute the sales plan. You're not there to figure out, gosh, who am I supposed to be talking to? They tell you who you're supposed to talk to. When it's your own company, you got to figure out who you're supposed to talk to and how you're supposed to talk to them and who you're all about. So that's something that's a little different. And it's something that Larry alluded to in the LinkedIn post about this, because that's really the superpower that we have as solo consultants. It seems like it's a drawback, right? We're tiny, we're competing in many cases with much bigger firms, but we get to decide what our market is. And most people don't get to do that. If you're in a big company, you don't get to decide, right? That's already decided for you, but you can decide to set up your market such that you are the 800-pound gorilla in your market. And for most of us, we don't need $1 billion market. We don't need 1 million clients. Let's just say we're aiming for $1 million to keep the numbers nice and even, and 100 clients or 10 clients or whatever it might be. It's much easier to get those 10 clients when we are the 800-pound gorilla in that market versus, okay, I'm another sales coach, or I'm another business coach, or I'm another web designer, whatever it is. There's so many people out there in whatever the broad category is, there's no way for you to stand out. And I don't know about you, but I've certainly gone through this notion of fear of missing out, the FOMO, right? Oh, if I shrink my market, but there's these other people that I could help, and I do help sometimes. But if you dilute what you stand for, then you don't stand for anything. And one of the things that I try to think about when it comes to positioning is it's like a magnet. You've got two poles, and the power of the magnet is equivalent on the attractive and repulsive side. So you can't have a magnet that attracts everybody. It's too weak. And if you're going to have a magnet that really attracts people strongly, you got to have an opinion that's going to cause other people to say, that guy's crazy. I would never, no, I completely disagree. That's totally fine. Because first of all, you want to attract the people who are part of your tribe that you're going to resonate with, who are going to be great clients. But you also want to drive away the people that you're just going to clash with during the sales cycle. And heaven forbid, if you land them as a client, it's going to be a disaster. So use your positioning superpower. That's the thing that makes it easier. And I like to think of it as, instead of, is my market small versus large? Is my sales and marketing easy versus hard? Because we're all programmed to think that larger markets are better than smaller markets, even if we can't serve even the small market. And the way I sort of trick myself to get over that fear of missing out is say, I really like easy sales cycles where it doesn't even feel like any selling's going on, right? It's a repeat customer. It's a great referral. It's a perfect fit. Those are great. And I remember those. And I also remember the slogs where it's just uphill and it's like 6 months of calls and meetings and other meetings. And then there's a no decision, or they went with someone else, or they actually did sign up, but you kind of had that weird feeling the whole time. And then sure enough, it's like the client from hell. So if you're scared about focusing your market, try to think of it as easy versus hard rather than large versus small. And part of what will help you with this is having these conversations with those people you already know. Now, some of those people may be ideal clients already, people you've worked with in the past, or prospects who match your ideal profile. Some of them may not be. That's okay. But you can't hide behind technology. And I will say this as somebody who's introverted and technologically inclined and has spent a lot of time hiding behind technology. It feels like you're taking a shortcut, but you're really not. And I'm not saying the technology is bad, right? We were talking about Twitter earlier, LinkedIn, email newsletters, whatever it is. All those things are great, but they're not a substitute for one-on-one or small group human interaction in a conversation, right? The conversation is the fundamental building block of the relationship. So we think of those other tools as facilitators of conversation, right? Ways to bubble up the people we want to talk to versus a replacement for it, right? It's like eating the supersize me diet all the time. That's like your social media and email relationships. We want to think of it instead as just a way to make a reservation for us to have a real meal and sit down with somebody and have a good conversation. Now, part of reaching out and actually having conversations with people that we already know is people want to work with us again. People suddenly remember, oh, you got to talk to Larry. He's actually in need of what you're doing and so on. And this will just happen organically. And it's some of the lowest hanging fruit out there that, again, a lot of people, they spend so much time trying to get new leads into their system, into their world, and they don't follow up with the people they've already worked so hard to bring into their network. So devote time every week, even if you've only got half an hour, even if you're crazy busy. And if you don't have a lot of project work going on and you really need it, 5, 10, 20 hours of just going and talking to people, it's going to pay dividends. And then the other thing is your website has a single job, which is to get leads. And for a long time, I didn't think of it that way, or I thought of it as a way to tell everyone how great I was, which is really like nobody cares about that. Not even me, right? I just thought I was doing what I was supposed to do. The job of the website is to get leads. And the way to do that is to teach instead of market, right? I don't know how big anyone's marketing budget is on this call, but I'm guessing that the highest marketing budget on this call is insignificant compared to the amount of money that larger firms are spending. It's really hard to stand out just by pushing, we're so great. But if you can be the one that teaches your ideal prospect how to solve their problem, you're the go-to person. And people worry, well, what if I teach them too much and I give too much away? And it's kind of like, well, if they can take your plan and just go execute it, they're probably not a great client, right? You're just going to fight. They're not going to see the value. If they can do half your plan and then say, gosh, it would be so great to do the rest of this. I don't know what everyone's business is, but I like to use the analogy everyone can understand. Like, suppose I'm going to build a deck, right? And I go search and I find some, here's the 10 steps you need to build a deck. And it's probably like, okay, I can, step 1, measure the backyard. Step 2, calculate how much wood you need. Step 3, go to the store and buy wood or whatever, right? And somewhere around step 4, where it's actually like, okay, now start like connecting stuff. I'm like, okay, crap, I'm done. I need to hire somebody to do this. It just doesn't make sense for me to even attempt this. Or maybe I'm actually really good at this, but I'm too busy. I've been meaning to build a deck for 5 years and I haven't done it. And so even though I have the capability, it's just not worth my time to do that. And the nice thing about this teaching approach is, one, most people who are in service love this stuff. Like, they're passionate about the thing that they do, that they help people with, as opposed to marketing, which feels like a little icky. And you have all these boring websites that are like, you can't even tell who's who, what's what. And I kind of think of it as there's like a spectrum. When you're hanging out with your work-related buddies and you're talking work-related stuff, you have opinions, you're smart, you're engaged, you're passionate. Anyone who's like into that is like, oh, you know what you're talking about. This is great. But then if you go to the website, it's like, it's news fest, right? And we want to be able to take that superpower, the positioning, and have that run across the whole gamut of our interaction. So if someone runs into you at a bar, at a networking meeting, on your website, on LinkedIn, the story is all going to be the same, and you're going to offer them value. You're going to try to help them solve their problem. And then the nice thing is when you do the follow-up calls, because you got to call people to follow up on these things, right? Say you've got the lead magnet of how to build the deck. And I used to do this too. I would put little white papers out on my website and I would just wait for people to call me because they were so inspired by my brilliance, and just doesn't happen, right? Think about it. When you get information from someone else's website, how often do you follow up and try to buy from them? Sometimes, but very rarely. Usually it's somebody else coming to you and saying, okay, I saw that you grab my lead magnet about building a deck. What kind of deck are you trying to build? What's holding you back? Oh, that'll look nice, right? And you're having a conversation about deck building, not about sales, where deck building, of course, is the metaphor for whatever it is that you actually are working with them on. And the nice thing is you're always in service mode, right? You're teaching instead of marketing, you're connecting instead of networking, and you're helping instead of selling. And so for most people who are in the service world, who think sales is kind of icky, but I love helping my clients, this way you get to act the same way through the whole process, from marketing to sales to the proposal to the actual work. You don't have to be in sales mode or marketing mode and then switch into client service mode. It's just all the same. You get to be the best you. And I think that's probably the most important piece of technology that I was missing for a long time. I was trying to fit myself into the technology and be someone else so I could use the technology. And I'm pretty technically adept, but I can't change into a salesperson. I realized what instead I think we want is technology that brings out the best in us. And I've been kind of rambling on for a good half hour here, and I want to make sure that I'm actually saying things that are meaningful to you. So anyone have questions or comments or things that you want to make sure I touch on?
I think this idea of time is really important. I'll just ask you this, and then I'll bring Cass up, who raised the hand. So what do you do to be able to free up that time if you don't have the inclination for social connecting or sales or prospecting, regardless of what system you have underpinning, what you're doing? Do you have a sort of an approach that's worked for you?
Yeah, because I went through this myself. I realized that I was doing this wrong, and it's weird because back in the days when we used to like go around town and hang out, I'd like run into some old colleague at the grocery store or something, like, oh, it was so great, I just ran into Larry, right? And we had this great conversation. And then I would go back and sit at my desk and try to make myself call these new prospects. And I sort of had that notion of, wait, why am I not calling Larry regularly, right? Like I actually have his number. I could just pick up the phone and call him. And I literally said, I'm going to change the default setting in my head from I will do anything possible to avoid picking up the phone to I'm going to do phone first. And part of what's built into the tool is to let me do this stuff easily, right? I'm sort of user number one, block off time on the calendar, pull up the list of people, click start call mode, go to the first one, call, have the conversation, save your notes, go to the next one. And so I'm spending as little time as possible worrying about who to talk to and as much time as possible just having conversations. And what I would say in addition is think of it almost like concentric circles. So you've got your really close people that you could literally pick up the phone right now and just talk to without any problem. But maybe you don't talk to them as much as you would like, right? Friends, family, business partners, clients, whatever. And then once you feel comfortable doing that, just like the bunny slope, right? Because you can already do this. There's no awkwardness. You know they're going to be psyched to hear from you. Then you move out to like the next circle, like, oh, the prospect that asked you to follow up, that maybe you're not being systematic as you should about following up and so on. And then get to the point where, I spend a lot of my day calling people who grab lead magnets off my website, which 5 years ago, I never would have thought I would enjoy doing. And the nice thing is people love it because I'm not trying to sell them. We're just talking about whatever the subject of the lead magnet is, and we're having a great conversation. So I say, like, if you're like me, this seems really daunting. It seems like you're perched at the top of the double black slope and you have no idea how to get down it. Like, why the hell would I pick up the phone if I didn't have to, kind of thing. And so start easy, right? Start with the bunny slopes, but you got to block off time in your calendar to do this, right? It's like going to the gym. If you really want to go to the gym, put it in your calendar. If you really want to have these conversations, put it in your calendar and then you'll do it. And you don't have to have a ton to get the momentum going that you're like, hey, actually, this is pretty cool. I'm getting referrals. I'm having a good time. We're going out to grab drinks with so-and-so. I managed to connect Stephen and George, and they're excited about that. Good things will start happening. And it's kind of like quantum mechanics. You can't predict on any individual call whether you're going to get a lead or someone's going to give you a great parenting tip or whatever. But over time, good things will happen.
Got it. Hey, Cass, do you have a question or a comment?
Hey, Larry, thanks. First of all, Reuben is amazing. All of his points really, really good. I have a couple of questions though, if that's okay.
Please.
Okay, so when it comes to two things, I've been mostly involved with the hard sales, like the ones you mentioned, like the grueling sales that go on for 6 months and 7 months. I've been mostly involved with the IT sector, so I've been working with IBM and Microsoft, and the sales are, and that's where the money is really. When the sales cycle gets longer and longer, that's where the money is, because the profits are just that big. Now, when you connect that to the method or the technique of sort of going in with sort of a teaching experience or a learning experience, something that you can add value with the sale and sort of lead with that education or a teaching mechanism, and then follow up with the sale. What I found was that after a while, the clients get so smart about it, they can smell the sale just like miles away. As soon as we go in with a free education session or something that we can teach them, or something that is related to education before we lead into the sale, they can smell that sale, man. They can just smell that coming, and they just get averse to that teaching experience. So that's one thing. Second question, if I could just send you my question, then you can just answer at your pace. The second thing is when it comes to using technology with sales. Now I'm 42, I'm 41, and I have seen the transition from person-to-person interactions and sales based on physical personal interactions, and then technology starts sort of creeping in, and to this point that there's so much technology involved. There's LinkedIn, there's all sorts of social media, there is online interactions. Now the next people that are coming, the people who are joining sales at this point, they're not that people who were maybe in their early 30s, maybe late 20s. They haven't seen that person-to-person interaction when it comes to sales, generating sales and leads through interaction and through personal relation development. Do you feel that part is going to be lost after a while? Because as time progresses now, with COVID and everything happening, people are getting more and more dependent on technology rather than face-to-face interactions. This is the case with the salespeople, but also the clients. They've also started to sort of depend more on technology rather than physical interactions on a personal level. I would love for you to shed some light on that. That's my questions.
Okay, sure. So let's talk about the enterprise sales cycle for a second. I think there are some sales cycles that are 6, 12, 18 months long, right? If you're selling jumbo jets or big enterprise solutions, it's going to take a long time. And I might have been a little flippant in my use of that term earlier. So thanks for pointing that out. What I meant to distinguish between is the sales cycle that should take a week or a month, that takes 6 or 7 months because you don't have a good fit. And there's a difference between that and the sales cycle that has to take 6 to 12 months because that's how long it takes, because it's so complicated and there's so many people involved. So, and I think you have the same problem. I've been, in a prior life, I was involved in a lot of enterprise sales, and I think it's even more important in those situations to define who your ideal prospects are clearly, because otherwise you could waste a year on them. Right? It's not like you just waste a couple months and a few phone calls here and there. I mean, I remember getting on airplanes and going across oceans for sales meetings that I should never have been in. And that really stinks. And I think, as you said about the free education and all that, everyone knows what that's for. And there's also a difference between, hey, here's a helpful lead magnet on my website, go build your deck. And I'm inviting you to my steak and wine dinner about deck building. Right? There's different, hey, let's go have coffee, let's have lunch, let's have dinner, let's go to Europe together, let's get married. And the more you move up that chain, the more close you are to sales. And so I think that's fine, but let's not pretend that it's something else. I think where problems come in is when somebody's pretending it's one thing when it's really something else, right? If it's really just free education, have it be free education. If it's free education with the hope that you're going to buy something, just say that, right? Like, hey, we really want you guys to do this, but it's all free, right? It's part of the sales cycle. Anytime you introduce inauthenticity into the sales cycle, I feel like you slow things down. Like, you might be able to fool some people some of the time, but at the end of the day, it's going to come back and bite you. And I think one of the challenges in enterprise sales, one of the reasons I wanted to get out of it was there was just so much BS and so many people playing game on both sides of the table. But I do think that there's something that especially when you define your market well and say, hey, we're here, we're going to say no to the wrong opportunities, we're going to say yes to the right opportunities, and we're not going to BS you. There's definitely some sales cycles where you'll get penalized for that, but I think there's a lot where you're actually going to stand out from the crowd who is trying to sneak something past someone and doesn't necessarily do a good job with it. Now, the other thing about these long sales cycles is if you can follow up religiously when you're supposed to follow up and do what you say you're going to do, I don't know if it's necessarily going to win you the deal, but it's probably going to put you in the upper 50% of the competitors, because a lot of these folks don't actually do what they say they're going to do. And it could be as simple as call me next Tuesday and I'll have an answer for you, right? And they're testing you, like, are you going to call me next Tuesday? And if you can deliver on that, doesn't necessarily mean that you can deliver the enterprise infrastructure deal that we're talking about. But if you can't call me next Tuesday, how am I ever going to believe that you're going to deliver, this $10 million deal with a million moving parts?
I'd like to weigh in on something, Cass, you said that I think was really interesting, and that is to separate the fundamental physics of business from the tactical sort of containers, of how things are done. And the fundamental principle of trust is not going away. The fundamental principle of people making decisions based on primitive emotions isn't going away. The Robert Cialdini persuasion stuff is not going away. It's just the containers have shifted, right? So I remember a couple of years ago, I was like a monster networker years ago. I don't go to any networking. I don't even believe in networking at all. I believe in community and connections and centers of influence. Kind of strategies. But I just don't go to networking events. I think it's just a waste of time. But I remember before I get all these invites from people like NetSuite, and I'd go to their thing and there'd be 15 salespeople in the room. And it was just kind of like, there was more salespeople than people who showed up. And it's just not the right way to do it. And there's another company that's doing this too. It's one of those staffing companies where they pretend to offer value, but they just sick a salesperson on you. And I just don't want to talk to those people. And they're calling me all the time. But I think that what works is the thought leadership, personal branding approach, where you stand for something in the market consistently and people will see you. LinkedIn is the best pipeline management system I've ever seen. It's unbelievable. And you can do it with lots of different, tactics now. But that stuff works. And like Reuben's saying, offering value in a system with a good technology underpinning really works, because if you create a sub-community in a micro niche in a Microsoft or an IBM or one of these companies where you really understand them, they'll come. They'll come. And you could say, look, we're going to make offers to you. You decide, right? I'm not going to twist your arm and make you go, it's like, you come to the free thing and now you have to sit through a demo. That's like ridiculous. But if you create a community around something they're thinking about all the time and you really understand them, I think that could work. I bet you could get into a Microsoft, but it's not going to happen in 2 weeks, right? But, that's what I'm seeing people do that's working.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That is a great point, Larry. And I don't think I did a good job with your last question, Cass. I apologize. Just to build on what Larry was saying, I do think that there's a different level of technological comfort and awareness in different age cohorts, generally speaking. But to Larry's point, the wiring inside here is still pretty much the same. And so as somebody who spent a lot of time trying to use technology to replace myself, what I try to do now is to use technology to do the stuff that it's good at, like remind me to call somebody, search my notes, show me a report of who's referred who and how much business I got. But the whole point is let the computer do that stuff so that I can focus on the actual human to human interaction that as of yet can't be replaced, and that it's actually really important, not just for my business, but for me as a human being to have. So I think you can get the best of both worlds. Like, let's use the technology as a facilitator, not as a substitute.
It's so interesting, this conversation, because this meeting was about CRM and technology, and you're not talking a lot about the CRM and technology. You're talking about, the stuff on top of it, the relationship between the people and all of that more than anything.
Well, I think
Cass, do you
that's
have
the
anything
important
else?
thing.
Cass, do you have anything else?
No, thank you so much. That's so helpful.
Okay,
Thank you.
perfect. So Reuben, did you want to make a comment on that? And then George, I think, has something he wants to weigh in on.
Well, it is like, I like the CRM and have all these cool features and all this and the other thing, but the whole point is it's got to work with who we are. And that's why I wanted to talk about who we are and kind of how we function, which is very different than how we would function if we were, sales rep number 893 at IBM, right? Any of us could probably do that job. Like, my opinion is a lot of people who say they're bad at sales are actually really great at sales if you do sales the right way. But it's a whole different tool set. And, from trying to fly the space shuttle, and I remember switching from Salesforce to HubSpot, and then for like 3 months, I was like, oh my gosh, flying the 747 is so easy. I love it. And realizing that eventually that was like still not the right fit. I want sort of like the exoskeleton that makes me stronger, doesn't make me someone different. George. Sorry, my dog is seeing somebody.
Your dog must know that I'm ready to say something.
The pizza.
Yeah, I was going to actually echo Larry's comment of 2 seconds ago, because the published theme of your presentation was using technology to close business, and you really haven't talked about it except at the very beginning. But you started out by talking about a quoting system, an online quoting system, proposal system, and I don't know whether you still use it or not, but in my organization, we used a tool called Quote Roller. And the whole idea was that you would have populated Quote Roller with all of the possible components of a proposal. And when you were ready to send one, you basically glued them together with checkboxes as to which things you wanted in there. And then you send a link to the proposal to the client, and so on and so forth. And at least for us, I'm just sharing with the group that after all was said and done, we stopped using it because it was basically too complicated. There were too many permutations. You had to keep it updated with your pricing schedule. I mean, it was almost a full-time job, not quite, but there was a lot of time, effort, and energy involved in maintaining the Quote Roller system. So ultimately, we just went back to doing normal proposals, which seemed fine enough. I don't think Quote Roller won us any business or lost us any business. May have made us slightly more organized, but fundamentally, we walked away with it, away from it, and went back to normal proposals, which was fine. And the other comment I have is, Yeah, to wit on the CRM system, do you have some homegrown CRM? I mean, believe it or not, for me, every time we use every time we use Salesforce, I've never been a big fan of Salesforce. Everyone I know in corporations seems to love Salesforce, and they integrate it with all sorts of enterprise elements of their organization, so that they have lots of information and resources in Salesforce. But myself, I just had a much more simplistic approach to tracking who I wanted to talk to, and I would use a very old FileMaker system with like 10 fields on it and a lot of free form space. And so I could put any and all notes I wanted to, very simply into the system. And it became like a Rolodex of tickler file to call people. So, those are my only two comments. Is I was curious what your CRM actually is, and then my editorial comment on the quoting system.
Would it be worth doing a quick screen share? Like not a full demo or anything, but just kind of show people what this is?
I mean, I'm happy.
And I'll leave that, I'll
sure.
leave that up to the group. I'm just wondering kind of if that, George, is that part of the answer that would help you?
Well, if the conversation is a CRM system and there's some uniqueness to it, yeah, let's look at it. I mean, at least glance at it.
So Reuben, that's up to you.
Yeah, let's
go there.
let's take a quick look. I'll try not to belabor everybody with too many details, but
Okay.
I think George, your point about the complexity of the proposals is an important one. The proposals are very much part of this system, so they're all integrated in. And I think one of the things that's hard about some of these templatized proposals is, like you say, there's so many building blocks. And the way I do mine, and the way I encourage users of the system to do theirs, is I have a template. And then the idea is when you're filling out the template, you can be live searching your notes and copy them in. So let's just see. Here's a draft we have going on here. Edit content. And oh, it's expired. So that's another point, right? The proposals actually expire at a certain point, and you have to extend them if you want to let the customers accept them. So you've got these things like customer name and date and so on. But then if I come in here to fill things out, I can pull up my notes. And in this case, this is pretty lame because it's just a demo. But I might have pages and pages of notes across different conversations with somebody. And so the idea is, I want to know what's their current situation. Let me make sure I'm covering that correctly. What's their big problem? What do they want to see in a solution? I can kind of copy and paste that over into the proposal, do a little light editing. And in 15 to 30 minutes, I've created a really custom proposal that feels really custom, but that didn't take me a lot of time or stress to develop. And then when someone's reading it, we basically want them to be going through and saying, yep, you get it. Okay, you get it. Great. All right. Yeah, that's what we talked about. Okay, good. Let's do it. And then you can even do things like offer different options within a single proposal. And something else that you can't do in a regular proposal is you can embed some video. So just a little thing that says, hey, I'm so glad we got connected. I hope this proposal covers what we talked about. Let me know if you have any questions. Silly things like that actually seem to make a big difference, especially because we are in this world where there's a lot less getting together face to face. So that's the proposal editor. The e-signature is built in. And you get to track where all this stuff is. So, you get to see if I've got 3 proposals out, I know which ones have been read, when they were last read, if they haven't been read, and so on. I get notifications on that. The dashboard itself, a little bit lame because I need to put some demo data in here, but the key things that I want to know are things like, well, how many referrals did I get this week? How many leads did I get off my website? And if those numbers are 0, what am I doing to fix that? How many conversations did I have? How many conversations are overdue? And then something that's a little bit of a challenge for solo people, especially if you hate sales to begin with, is like actually getting started, as somebody mentioned earlier. Like, how do you get this habit ingrained? So there's a little sort of Peloton style leaderboard that lets you connect with other users of the system. And all it does is share how many conversations are you having and how many conversations are they having. There's no other private information revealed. It's just kind of a way to motivate yourself. And then if you have actual documents in flight, you can see what revenue is coming in. So that's kind of the overview. For a lot of folks, they've got Google Analytics in their website, but they're not checking it regularly. They don't necessarily know how many conversations they're having. They don't know how many conversations are overdue. They don't necessarily know, okay, what's the status of the proposals we have. So this gives you all that at a glance. And then the contact system, it's like most other CRMs, name, company, title, and so on. And then you've also got this last and next field. That's when did I last have a conversation? When am I next supposed to have a conversation? One of the things that always bugged me about Salesforce was there was always that next task date that you could put in. But if you forgot to do that, or you went to lunch and got logged out or whatever, it would just kind of disappear and these leads would just fall off my radar. And these tags have conversation frequencies associated with them. So if you don't set a next conversation date, it will do that for you. So you kind of always keep up a rhythm, and people don't go away unless you tell them to go away. And we talked earlier about actually making time to do this. So you can click this add to calendar button, and it will literally create a recurring calendar meeting for you. Say, okay, I'm going to make my prospect calls on Thursday mornings, for example, or whenever you want to do it. And when that alert comes up, it'll drop you right into here. I can click start call mode. It'll take me to the first one I'm supposed to call. I click this button, I make the call. So I spend a lot of my time like this, right? I'm on my headset, just having conversations with people and take my notes. And you can see here, I'm tracking who's referred this person. If they have any lead magnets or documents or other conversations, I can see that at a glance. And if I just hit save, it's going to set the next conversation date based on the tags. And if they say, well, call me next Tuesday, right, I can do that manually. And then it's going to take me to the next person in that queue that I'm supposed to call. So I'm not staring at a list, wondering who I should call. I'm just having conversations. I know for me personally, this is my favorite feature, because I knew once I realized I should be doing this, maybe I'm just overly analytical, but I would kind of stare at my list of people and then finally force myself to call some people at the end of the day. And I still have like the muscle memory of the tension in my back and my neck from like, this sucks. And now I'm just like, let's talk to some people. This will be fun. And sure enough, it's a lot more fun. And the other thing that's interesting is it's a lot more effective because there's no pressure on an individual call. I'm never trying to close anybody. I'm never like, oh my gosh, if these guys don't buy, I'm screwed. And just let's have conversations. Let's be helpful. There's more people to talk to. Do the right thing by everyone. Just be relaxed and natural. And first of all, that's just nicer for me in my mental state. But it's also much more effective as a sales technique because you don't get that that vibe that Cass was talking about, like, oh, is this the free webinar where they're going to pitch me afterwards or anything like that. Now, maybe you get a call and you get voicemail, so you just move it back a few days, hit save, and so congratulations, you're all caught up. You're done with your prospecting calls. So this is just an easy way to stay in touch with people and actually have conversations. You can do things like email people, but the idea is we're deliberately keeping this separate from email because we want to focus on those real human to human conversations. And then the last piece we talked about, the lead magnets, let's say 5 ways to get more referrals, whatever the appropriate thing is. And it's got, here's a list of contacts that actually subscribe from this. I can edit this just like the proposal piece and include things like video and so on. And you can even do things like interactive forms. So, I've got a questionnaire, for example, for people who want to come on my podcast. So instead of going back and forth endlessly, I can gather some information up front. And then when it comes to offering this online, the idea is instead of displaying a form, we want to be able to stick a button on the website. So people kind of tune out forms. Buttons are much more inviting. You can craft that button appropriately if you know who your ideal prospect is and what the message is. Like, hey, this is build your deck, right? like whatever the right message is for them to actually do what they want to do. And you can see how it's actually working. Not only how many leads did you get, but how many conversations did you have, and did you get any revenue from it, right? Maybe you came up with this really clever clickbaity kind of lead magnet and gets you 100 leads, but none of those people are buyers because it's actually targeting the wrong audience. You have a different lead magnet that gets you 5 leads and $100,000. That's much more useful. So in addition to, obviously you've got this like green button here that may work well or may not. So you can change how it looks, change what it's going to say, change all the colors.
I want to get Karen's question in here really quick because we're running out of time. No, it's okay. Because we're top of the hour. We'll switch into the networking mode in a minute. But Karen, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, and this is really a great sophisticated way of doing something simple for solopreneurs. But I'm going to just say, sort of controversially, I think that those of you that come from the corporate world have a very different view than those of us that have been entrepreneurs and solopreneurs from the beginning. Because when I hear one of my clients say they need CRM, I'm like, why the hell do you need a CRM system? Take a spreadsheet and write down the number of clients. I think it depends on the business you're in, but there are so many tools out there, and every tool does everything else now these days. Like, to add another tool to the toolkit for a solopreneur that has limited resources and limited time and limited people to manage all this stuff, I'm just not really understanding why, unless I'm working with the IBMs and the Microsofts, and maybe that's because that's not my clientele, but I'm not really getting the need for yet another CRM. Like, I don't even think a solopreneur needs a CRM at all. I think they need marketing automation and email automation and web technology and all that. But like, CRM to me is just like a big Salesforce kind of thing. No, I don't mean Salesforce as in the product. I mean, as in having a large Salesforce.
Well, thanks. I think that's a great point. I think a lot of it depends, and I actually have some slides where I have diagrams with different dimensions. And a lot of it depends on what happens. How do your buyers buy? So, for example, if your buyers can click add to cart and buy something, or buy an online course or something like that, that doesn't require conversations, then marketing automation all the way, right? Email address, marketing automation, done. And by the way, that's a really clever way of doing things because it saves you a whole bunch of trouble and it's much more scalable. Now, I think if you need to have conversations with prospects along the way and you need to devise some kind of custom solution for them, you need some form of CRM. Now that could be your head, that could be your trusty black notebook, it could be Post-it notes on your screen, it could be a spreadsheet, it could be Salesforce, it could be Mimrin, it could be whatever. But whether you have a technological tool for it or not, you're doing that CRM process.
Yes.
And my personal feeling, I may just be a little OCD, is that you want to have a tool to help you remember all this stuff. Because I can't keep it in my head, and it's not worth, like, the cost of forgetting something along the way is relatively high. Now, at the same time, I agree, like, I don't want to fly the space shuttle or 747, and for some people, Mimrin's overkill. So I don't think that's, I wouldn't even consider that a controversial opinion, but I do think if you're having conversations with people, right, if you need to follow up and diagnose and then prescribe a solution, you need some form of CRM.
Awesome. So Reuben, could you undo the screen share, and then we'll
Absolutely
go back to the gallery. First, I want to thank you for doing this. It was really insightful. I got a lot out of it. If people are interested in talking to you or trying this out, what would the next steps be?
I'll put my email address right here in the chat in case people don't have it. And I'm on LinkedIn, and you can also find me via my website at mimrin.com. You can sign up for a free trial, give it a spin, let me know. I'd love to have, people for whom it's the right tool, enjoy it.
Awesome.